Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to cover the Season 15 patch notes. I believe it says somewhere in here that Season 15 begins at midday server time on the 9th for every region. So that means that it will be coming out on some regions earlier than others. I know my region actually gets it less than 24 hours from now. So of course I'll be streaming that tomorrow. But anyway, we're just going to go through all the changes, what I think of them. And if you guys have been following the kind of discussion around it so far, there's a lot of controversy around this season. In fact, it might be the most controversial one so far. People are overall very split on the decisions that have been made. First off, Fearless Draft. I think this is a massive W. I won't talk about this too much because it doesn't affect solo queue, so it won't be affecting the games that we'll be playing. But I think Fearless Draft has potential to really shake up the competitive scene, and I'm personally a big fan of this. I think it'll be real interesting. So, coming into Season 15, they've started to kind of theme these seasons. I believe there's 2 of them per year, or maybe 3 of them per year, where, you know, they're themed after something specific. This one's meant to be Nexus themed. It's changed the color of the map, also what some of the structures and stuff look like. Now, here's the first interesting thing. So there's this new neutral objective, Atakhan, I think is how it's said. Spawns at 20 minutes, can appear in the river close to either top or bottom. This is where most of the controversy has come from. So as you can see, it's based on, you know, kind of a few different conditions as to like where he'll spawn. And also there are 2 different forms he can spawn, and both of them are absolutely busted. So if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see what the actual buffs are. So here's the first one. Upon taking down Voracious Atakhan, the team that slayed him receives a permanent 40 gold bonus to champion takedowns. I think that's not amazing, but it's decent, right? Here's the big one though, and a one-time death mitigation for the next 150 seconds. If they would die, instead the player will enter stasis for 2 seconds and return to base after another 3.5. When this happens, the would-be killer instead gains 100 gold and 1 blood petal for their team. So this is pretty insane. So basically what this says is that if you can just die, like you can just run it down kind of, and you just get teleported back to base, you won't die, and you only give over 100 gold, which is really OP. I think this is a really disgusting snowball mechanic. I think already the snowballing team in League is, you know, very far ahead, right? Like it's very hard to win from behind in this game, and that just makes this even harder. And I think you're going to see some really unhealthy stuff around this where, you know, the team that's winning gets this buff and then will just like 5-man tower dive something that they really shouldn't be able to, kind of knowing that they can just be sent back to base and really not lose anything for it, right? Like if your whole team gets aced and you only give 500 gold, but you get something like a, I don't know, a tier 2 turret and some kills, you're definitely going to be up even more gold off of that. So I suspect that this will eventually get changed. I think that even if it, you know, even if like it was kind of like Akshan passive where you died and you just got instantly respawned, I think this would still be really OP. So the fact that you actually don't die and you only give over 100 gold, it's pretty OP, especially because again, it's like your team is already going to be ahead, so it's going to be hard to kill these champs anyway. And I'm really not a fan of that because I think that, you know, if you're the losing team and you do somehow manage to get a kill, right, it's already really difficult. If you're behind, that should really be rewarded. And the fact that like they're just going to be throwing themselves at you, I think it's really broken. So yeah, currently this is disgusting. I think it's going to get nerfed, but we'll have to see. The other one is also pretty OP. So if you can take down the other form of Atakhan, the team that slayed him receives 25% increase to all epic monster rewards. So that means, you know, all the dragons. It means dragon souls. It means elder, baron, and grubs, which is pretty broken, I think. You know, I think that the individual dragons are actually kind of weak, so I actually like that. But like, you know, if you think about things like soul, like dragon soul is already like a pretty much free win, unless you get like Chemtech dragon soul. That's really the only one that doesn't just like outright win you the game. You know, things like elder and baron, right, already very strong. The grubs, I think, you know, if you can manage to get 6 grubs and then on top of it you have this already, this, I think, again, like, it really increases the snowball mechanics. The reason I kind of think this is, like, bad is because it's, like, sometimes in League, you can be relatively even in gold, so there aren't really a ton of bounties, but you kind of feel like the game is, like, really bad. And, like, what I mean by that is, let's say you're down, your team's only down, like, 2k gold, right? The game, at least, like, the bounties, they won't really reflect that you're that far behind. There probably won't be huge bounties, probably won't be objective bounties, but if on top of that, you know, you're down Atakhan, you're down 2 dragons, you're down 6 grubs or something, you know, that game is, like, fundamentally over, but the comeback mechanics don't really reflect that. So I think that like these sorts of things where it's like more power that isn't really factored into bounties, at least as far as I know, I think that can be, I mean, that like rewards snowball even harder, and limits the comeback mechanics. And I think there's definitely like a, you know, in the past sometimes bounties were a bit too strong, right? Like If you're on the winning team, it didn't really matter because you could all die, you give over your bounties, and suddenly you're back even in gold. But I think that's definitely not the case at the moment. I think snowballing is incredibly, incredibly strong, and it's only getting stronger. So last one here, these are the petals that you get sometimes from killing people. It also drops, you get 6 of these when you get this buff. It just gets a little bit of XP. Now this is interesting, up to 100% based on their KDA, with a lower KDA offering more experience. So I guess that's meant to be some sort of catch-up mechanic, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. So yeah, I don't know. I'm overall okay. I kind of like the idea of like more things to fight for. Like I think it's good to kind of like force some action. I'm just not so sure that it should be so incredibly strong, because it kind of becomes like a very boring decision, whereas like, okay, this is not something that we can trade, right? Like if it's tuned incorrectly, it's not something that you can trade. You just have to fight it no matter what, and I think that's kind of unhealthy. I think forcing some sort of active decision, like something to progress the game, is good, but if it's too strong, it's like, okay, we can't trade on the other side of the map because we just lose the game instantly. And it kind of seems like the sort of thing where, like, well, if you're not ready to fight this and your team's already behind, the game won't actually end when they get this, but it's like more or less decided, so I think that can be kind of unhealthy. We'll see. Next one though, massive W. I really like this. I think respawning Nexus turrets is probably the best change that I've seen so far. I think that, getting or losing the game to like a backdoor after you've managed to win like a bunch of fights in a row and you're, barely surviving off 2 or 3 inhibs being down, I think is already like incredibly difficult, right? So I think having the Nexus turrets respawn, I really like it. I think it's good, and it kind of gets rid of some of the more frustrating ways to lose the game. So I'm kind of a fan. Now here's the next thing. There's some feats of strength. Now it says it's coming with Nexus. I don't know if that quite means if it's a seasonal effect, like if this goes away next season or if they'll keep it. I have a feeling it's like if they kind of like it, if the player base likes it, if they think it's good for the game, they'll probably keep it. If it doesn't go well, they'll probably scrap it, which is kind of fine, because I think it's okay to test new things, and then, if it's not good in a few months, hey, just get rid of it. It's fine. But anyway, let's see what it does. So it replaces the gold bonuses from first blood and first turret, adding a 3rd feat of strength for teams to fight over it, which requires 3 epic monster claims to complete. So basically, when you do this, it unlocks 2 things. One, if you have any of your tier 2 boots completed, it just gets upgraded immediately, which gives you like a little bit of stats. Now, it is kind of interesting that the stats on these aren't exactly even. It's 5 of everything and then 4 magic pen, but these stats are not really equal to each other. For example, 5 matter because this is worth a lot more than 5 armor. I would say 5 haste is worth a lot more than 5 attack speed, and 5 movement speed is worth probably more than anything else on this list. So these are maybe not particularly balanced, but I mean, hey, that's something they can come back and look at in the future, so it's not the end of the world. But the really big thing is that if it says somewhere in here, where is it? I think it's here. It says that you can upgrade. Where is it? Oh yeah, here it is. So later in the game, the feat winning team will also have the opportunity to upgrade their tier 2 boots to tier 3 by spending gold. Okay, must have at least 2 legendary items in their inventory, so that means it's probably going to be at around like the 20-minute mark or something. Now these are absurdly broken. So first one, this is for Berserker Greaves. Upon attacking a champion, gain 15% or 10% movement speed, decaying over 2 seconds, depending on if you're melee or ranged. Movement speed creep is a big problem in this game, and I think, gaining even more movement speed could be kind of an issue. I'll come back to this in a little bit. I want to go through them all first. Next one here, upgrading the CDR boots. Upon damaging an enemy with a spell, using a summoner spell, or buffing an ally, you gain, again, more movement speed. The upgraded sword shoes gives 10% magic penetration, which is kind of nice. We kind of like that. Now, these ones are very unhealthy. After taking physical damage from a champion, gain a shield based on level and also just percent as max HP. So basically exactly like the Canik shield, and Merc Treads has the exact same one. Then we've got Boots of Swiftness, increases your total move speed by 4%, which is, kind of nice again. And finally, the Synchronized Souls upgrade while out of combat increases your total movement speed by 10%. So you absolutely fly around the map. So let's talk about these. I think these are insanely broken. So like I said, the snowball mechanics have already been increased, right? You've got this new objective that if you win is extremely broken. Now you're getting a bunch of like free stats for free. You're also getting access to those blood petals or whatever they were called all the time. And on top of that, now you gain access to like a super gold efficient item that has some crazy effects. I think these are also like extremely unhealthy effects for the most part. So I think movement speed in general it's really annoying, because it's one of those things that limits the champion roster a lot. I think one of the ways to just create skill in this game is with skill shots, right? I think that skill shots means that even if a champ is like fundamentally kind of I don't know, maybe it's on the overtuned side. At least there is some kind of outplay potential. However, there's like kind of a point where you can go too far, and it actually makes skill shot champions non-viable because there's just too much movement speed in the game. And we actually saw that earlier this year when the ADCs mid, because they weren't reliant on mana, and because Fleet had more movement speed, and they had so much sustain from Absorb Life, they would just be rushing movement speed, and it'd be so difficult as a mage to actually land skill shots on them. And so what would happen is the few skill shots that were hit were just out-sustained, and the rest were dodged with all the mobility. And so what did that mean? That meant that everyone else had to play AD carries or play point-and-click champions, which I think actually lowered the skill of the game overall. Even though, like, again, like dodging the skill shots is kind of, or the movement speed to dodge skill shots is skillful, at some point it goes too far, and then it's like, well, we actually just can't play skill shot jams. We have to play point and click, which is why you saw the only mages at the time being played where you saw like a bunch of AD carries, and then it was like Hui and Azir. I think that was like basically it. So yeah, more movement speed is really scary for me. I think there's already like quite a lot of move speed in the game, and so even more is kind of, yeah, I think it's over the top. And then these ones, I think the like mini Kaenic shields, I really, really don't like this as well. So personally, I'm a big hater of shields in general. And the reason I don't like shields is because it punishes the losing team really disproportionately. So if you're losing, right, and the game is already very difficult, every little chunk that you can get, you know, makes that fight just like a tiny bit easier, right? If you can manage to chunk someone out, or just like get a little bit of their HP away, potentially you can find a way to win a team fight, right? The problem with a shield, though, is it means that if you're not strong enough to even get through the shield, you don't get to do any like meaningful chunk to the opponent's HP before the fight starts. I would much rather that this just gave a ton of health than it actually gave a shield. In fact, maybe even if it gave like more health, you know, like let's say, I'm just going to make this number up. Let's just say the shield's on average for like 200. I would rather that this gave just like, I don't know, plus 300 health rather than the 200 shield, because I think that is like a lot more fair for the losing team. It means that someone is appropriately punished if they take damage, as opposed to being able to use a shield to like constantly, you know, tank all this poke. And if someone does manage to get chunked out for being mispositioned, it doesn't actually eat into the actual health bar. So again, like I said, really big hater of shields in general. I think I'm really surprised they added this, because I think Kaenic was one of the most like imbalanced items, you know, this split, or I guess this season. And the fact that they're adding these to boots where they're like very easily accessible, and now it's here for AD champs as well, to me seems really broken. Now, obviously, everyone has access to these, right? Like, you can buy these on any champ. The thing is, though, it just, again, it incentivizes snowballing, right? It's going to be really important that you do secure the 2 of these 3 things or whatever in order to gain the feats of strength, because you're getting so many stats, you're getting access to these really OP items, and that's going to, like, if you get these around 20 minutes, and you get it for the Atakhan spawn, and your opponents don't have it, it's going to be super snowbally. So, yeah, I think these could be really, really busted. I wouldn't be surprised to see these toned down eventually as well. So the next one, teleport. This was something I was really interested in, because I think a teleport change, at least a major teleport change to mid, would be probably the biggest change mid lane has ever received. I've always been an advocate of, if they just made it so that TP couldn't be used in the first maybe 6 or 10 minutes, it would be a lot more balanced. And the thing, there's like a lot of issues with TP. Probably the biggest one is that not only is it really good in the mid to late game just for side landing and being able to TP to fights and stuff, but it's also one of the strongest, actually no, it is just the strongest summoner for the early game, because it allows you to just get free resets, which is super nice. And that definitely lowers the skill in laning phase as well, because people can take like more bad trades than they would normally and just, you know, base TP back. So again, I'm a big advocate of TP just being unusable early. And I also think mid lane would actually be stronger if TP were removed from the game. And the reason I think that is because the problem with TP is that if your opponent has it and you don't, you're going to be at a major deficit, especially if your opponent knows how to use it properly. But the thing is, I actually think that both mids would have more impact total if they were allowed to take combat summoners, right? Like, there are a lot of mages like Syndra and Victor or Cassio or whatever that would really like to take Ghost, and there's some assassins that would love to take Ignite in order to snowball and stuff. But again, if you take that and your opponent has TP, you're just going to be so far behind. But it's kind of at the point where like you are both neutralizing each other. And like, if you could handshake knowing that the enemy mid wasn't going to take TP, I don't think you'd take it either. But again, in the current state of it, you just kind of have to have it. Now, you might be wondering, the TLDR is, does it actually make a difference? I think no. I think that there are changes to TP. I think you're still going to have to take it mid every game. You can still use it very early in the game. There is a longer channel, but ultimately, you're still going to get back to the mid lane a lot quicker. I watched some gameplay on PBE, and it is kind of like annoying how long it takes, but I really do think you're going to have to take it all the time. I could be wrong, and I actually really hope I'm wrong, because if we can get to a combat summoner meta mid, I'd be so happy. But from what I saw, I think it's still just TP is what you have to take mid. So pretty disappointed if that's the case. You can read through the changes here yourself. You can see that based on the travel distance, it can take a lot longer. But again, like, especially because mid lane is the shortest lane, plus like early on, people don't have a lot of wave clear, so you're always going to be able to get back in time. I don't know. I think it's still just required, unfortunately. Now, there's a few minion changes as well, which I think the TLDR of this is that minions push a little faster. Let's just read it. So, changing some underlying minion turret rules to make early game laning less punishing in the worst cases. We want more matchups to feel playable, etc., etc. Minions will now clear each other out more quickly. Damn, such a hard sentence. Yeah, so this means that like the waves just push naturally on themselves a little easier. It does also mean that it's harder to build a big wave. And on top of this, I think they made it so a cannon wave is only every 3 waves. Oh yeah. Oh wait, okay. Maybe it's still the same, but the first one comes at the 4th wave. So that is like a little different. It means that mainly for the side lanes, you can't get dived as early. For mid lane, it means that maybe melee versus range matchups might play a little differently, because a lot of the time you go for that 3-wave crash, you use that cannon minion in order to protect yourself. This is something we'll have to try. I'm not sure if this is a positive or a negative. It's just kind of interesting. So I think we'll kind of wait and see on that one. Let's have a little look here. Okay, so turrets, I think, yeah, so they're just making turrets a little stronger in the early game. Also softening turret fortification, so that you can punish, I guess, the turret a little bit if you can manage to push them under turret, which I think is kind of good, because I think there are definitely some matchups early. Like, an example would be playing against something like Akali, where it's like, even if you do get under the turret, if you're playing something into Akali where you can't really harass her functionally because she just out-sustains, but like you also do no damage to the turret and you have nothing to use your prior for, you can definitely end up in the spot where you're just sitting there doing nothing other than just like chipping away at her health bar that realistically isn't moving. So I actually think that's kind of a nice change. I do like that. Now, champion bounties, they have made some changes to this. I think, honestly, not the changes I was looking for. I still think that people, if you're on the losing team, it's still way too easy to end up with a big bounty. I think I'd prefer that the bounties were either shared out a little more, or the bounties were shared in the other way a little more. So what I mean by that is, like, the problem is now it's like, if you are the fed person on the losing team, right, it's like the entire enemy team wants to kill you for a start. On top of that, if you die and you give that gold to an enemy carry that's already fed, you know, I've had some games where, let's say I'm like, I don't know, 3-0-0 something on the losing team, but then the enemy AD carry is like 5-0 something. It's like, you know, most likely if I die, it's going to the enemy AD and he's already like insanely accelerated. It's going to be even worse. So I would prefer if bounties were either a little harder to accumulate if you are on the losing team, and maybe needs to factor in the neutral objectives a little more, because I think that actually is a thing already in the game, but at least it doesn't feel like it. You know, when you're like down dragons and grubs and stuff, and you actually are very far behind, the bounties don't seem to really reflect that. Or like maybe have the bounty like shared a little bit between the people that get it. And the reason I'd like that is because also one thing that happens is, like, if you are in the losing team and you manage to get a bounty onto someone who's really fed, and if it goes on the wrong person, it can be really bad. You know, like, you've probably seen it where like you're losing and you somehow manage to pick up the AD carry, and then like your Leona accidentally takes it with like aftershock or something, and that feels so bad, you know, because like if something like 700 gold goes over to your Leona compared to 700 gold going over to your Victor, that's like a completely different game. And I think it'd be better just to kind of flatten it out a little bit, have it shared a little more fairly. Swift play, I don't really care about that. Yeah, okay, so ranked is beginning. This is where it says here, January the 9th at 12 p.m. on your local server time. And then there's a little, I think also, okay, I can't remember where exactly it says it, but there is, yeah, okay, here it is. So this is the only reset in all of 2025. So there's none of the 3 splits deal. You just get to keep your rank the whole split long, which I think is nice. You don't have to play anywhere near as much. Now, a couple of champions changes. So it looks like overall that Ashe got nerfed. Yeah, I think that's the play here. Yeah, actually, let's just read it. Ashe's update, reduce the extremely high power in the early levels. Yeah, so Ashe is ridiculously broken early game. Definitely makes a lot of sense. Looking to change some of Callista's early game power. Yeah, it's 80 carry. We won't worry too much about it. Twitch W slow amount increased. Okay, it's very random. Varus changes are kind of nice. We kind of like this as a mid laner because potentially we could play a mid, although it actually looks like they just nerfed him, right? Q mana cost decrease, W E mana cost increase. Okay, so they're trying to nerf his early lane. Okay, actually, that's a nerf in mid lane as well. Never mind. Okay, now this one's a little interesting. So there is one new item in the split, which is Bloodletter's Curse. This is good for a few champs. So they did change it. Originally, they teased it as an AP Black Cleaver, and then it ended up just granting MR instead of reducing, or sorry, granted pen rather than reduced magic resist. So that's kind of different. This is pretty good. So this allows you to get 30% magic pen shred for your team as like a mage, which is kind of nice. So I think the champs that could use this are champs like, you know, again, you think of stuff like Cassio or Brand and whatever. This is probably going to be a Void Staff replacement, I would imagine. Now, the only issue I have with this item is that these champs are already very overloaded on items they need. So if you think of something like Cassio, it's like you've already got, what, like Seraph's, Liandry, Raleigh, Deathcap, and then this that you're kind of, that's like 5 required items in your build path already. You know, champs, again, like Brand, you might have like Blackfire, Liandry, Raleigh, and then this. So it is, I am like a big fan of this item. I still think it's going to be somewhat situational just because a lot of these champs really need other items before they get to this anyway. But overall, I like this. I'm not a huge, I actually, let me rephrase that. It's like, I am kind of a fan of just adding more items and having more niches in general. I would like if there were more diversity with items and more choices that could be made. I think the argument against that is you don't want to overcomplicate things too much, especially because for players that come into the game that, you know, the league, I mean, league nowadays is like very overwhelming, especially with all the like hidden systems changes they just made this season. You know, having a super convoluted item system on top of that could be, you know, kind of frustrating. At the same time, I think that a lot of League's player base has played for a long time, and I think having more item diversity, it would be kind of interesting. Also, I think in general, you know, just like having one new item in the season and like just no real changes for champs other than 80 carries is pretty boring, especially when, you know, there isn't some system change that changes a lot of champions. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, when they added Runes Reforged, right, like that changed the meta, or when they added Mythics, like for better or worse, that changed the meta, or when they added Dragon Souls to begin with. I expect that with the new kind of snowball mechanics that you'll probably see what is already the case become even more extreme, which is the champions that have the ability to pressure early, whether that's in the laning phase or in the 2v2, are now even stronger than before, and champs that want to kind of AFK scale really aren't that viable and haven't been for a while, and I think that's just going to get even more extreme, and that can be problematic because I personally believe that the difference in strength between champions that are meta and champions that are off meta is far too large at the moment. I think that the game is fundamentally like pretty imbalanced, and I think that's like always somewhat going to be the case. Okay, there's always going to be a meta, there's always going to be the best champs. I'm not really saying that that's a bad thing, but I think when the difference becomes too large, that's a problem. You know, I think what you want it to be is that, like, okay, again, I'm just going to make up some numbers, but let's say the best champ in the game is like, I don't know, 3% better or 5% better than kind of like the worst champ in the game. Now, maybe that's unrealistic, but I think currently the gap is so big. You know, you look at one of these champs in mid that's extremely strong, something like Aurora, and then you compare it to like one of the mid laners that's on the weaker side, you know, something like a Vel'Koz or a Veigar, and it's like, how are these champs even in the same game? You know, like just not the same universe whatsoever. And that's like a really big problem because that really limits the diversity at higher elos, right? It can make things very boring. And I think also it's just like, it's not healthy for the game to just be, you know, played around the same like 20 or 30 champs over and over, right? Like, not only is it boring to play, it's boring for viewers, and it's probably like, it probably just gets old, you know, like, I mean, I'm kind of just repeating myself, but what I mean by that is like Fearless Draft is something they've kind of added to Band-Aid fix this. And even though like I like Fearless Draft, I do worry that like, okay, you're now going to like deepen the pool, right? Because you have to access more champions, but it might just deepen it to like 50 champions instead of 30, right? So rather than having the same 30 champions, now you have the same 50 champions, but we still haven't really accessed true diversity. It's just like kind of pseudo diversity. I don't even know if that made sense, but what I'm trying to get at is I think that they've really got to try and close the gap, I think, a little bit between the champs that are like the most OP and the champs that are the weakest. Finally, there's some runes that have been removed and some that have been put in their place. And there's some interesting ones here. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the one right here. Your ultimate's ability, damage, healing, and or shielding is increased by 14%. Takedowns on champions refund 7% of your ultimate's ability remaining cooldown. So this is pretty cool. I think you could see this on champions that aren't super reliant on mana flow ban because it's replacing nullifying orb. So, you know, maybe a champ like Syndra that is not super mana reliant could definitely go for something like this. I'm sure there are others, like maybe you look for something like Aurora Aurora. You know, Aurora kind of benefits from mana flow, but could probably drop it for a lot of this. So there are definitely some champs that would like this. Let's look at the other ones. So Stealth Wars placed in the enemy jungle are considered deep. After level 11, they're considered deep as well. 1 extra HP and extra duration. Probably not something that we would take as a mid laner. Sixth Sense. Automatically ping untracked and unseen ward within 900 units. After... Oh, unseen as well. That's kind of interesting. After level 11, Sixth Sense will also reveal the ward for 10 seconds. That's pretty cool, but it's got a long cooldown. Now, that replaces Zombie Ward. Yeah, I don't know. I could maybe see it. Like, that overall, like, this row here of these 3 things is pretty weak. So we could definitely pick up one of these. For each champion takedown, gain 4 trinket ability ace. That seems like kind of whatever. Yeah, I think overall, like, the thing is, the Electrocute tree itself is still not particularly strong right now, right? Like, most mid laners are only going Domination tree for Electrocute, and, like, the Precision and Sorcery trees is probably still a lot stronger, especially with this. So I suspect that this won't be meta to take any of these for now, but possibly in future if Domination tree gets buffed, or, you know, the meta trends towards, you know, Domination Keystones for whatever reason, you might see some of these picked up. I think that's pretty much it for the patch notes. So like I said, it comes out tomorrow. It's less than 24 hours for me. Overall, definitely mixed feelings towards it. You know, I'm always excited for the new split just because it's new, right? I think even if the new split sucks, it will be fun to begin with just because there's a bunch of new stuff. That's always the case. I think the real test is like a month in, are we actually enjoying it? And I think for me, definitely a little bit of trepidation towards it. I think that there are a lot of changes that have like potential, right? Like I think the new objective has potential as something that could be fought over, or just something more interesting to add to the game. I think the current state though, with like how strong things are, I'm pretty worried, you know, with the snowball mechanics, how strong the boots are, and also a bit disappointed by the TP change as well, and lack of items and champion changes. So overall, we'll have to see tomorrow. I'd highly recommend everyone try it because, once again, the new stuff is always fun, even if it ends up, you know, kind of sucking in the long term. If you have any thoughts on it, please put it in the comment section below. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. You know, are you excited? Give me a rating out of 10, how much you're looking forward to the next split. But anyway, if you liked it, go ahead and like and subscribe. See you guys in the next one.